In this video, we are going to talk about parameters. So far, we talked about types, returning types, right? Returning types for our functions. We talked about string, int, booleans, and so forth, right? But we also talked about void functions, which they don't return anything. They just do what we want to do, write the code inside the statements, and then we just call them, and then voila, magic happens, okay? But the good news is that we can also add parameters for each function, meaning that if we want to pass, for instance, a string into our function, that then we take that string and we do things inside of our functions, and then we return a certain value. Or if we want to create an int type function, which means returns an integer, we can just pass 2, 3, 4, 10 numbers and then add those numbers and then return results. So you can see now that there's a lot of things that we can do with this concept of adding parameters to our functions. Okay, enough talk. Let's go and take a look at what am I talking about here. Comment all of this out. Again, I do this so that you have it all if you need it. Okay, and I'm going to get rid of all of this because you know what? We don't need it now. Perfect. So once I have that, let's go ahead and create a function here. This type is going to be string. I'm going to call say hello. Now, here's what I'm going to do. To add a parameter, we're going to pass in the types of those parameters. I'm going to so in this case, I'm just going to add one parameter. So how do we do that? Well, we just start with a type. I'm going to say string. And I'm going to just give it a name. In this case, it's going to be a name. Okay? It's going to return something. That's the reason why we have this squiggly. You hover over, you will see telling us that we have to have a return statement. We knew that. Okay, so here what I'm going to do, I'm just going to say return. I'm going to go ahead and say hello. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to pass the name, which we are indeed passing as a parameter. What this means is that whenever we want to call this say hello, we have to pass a string type of whatever we want. In this case, it's going to be a name. And then when we return, it's going to say hello and then whatever we passed. So now we're adding a little bit of flexibility to our functions. Let's give it a try here. I'm going to come here and say hello. And look at that. Actually, let me try again. I should show you this. Say hello. Look at that. It says say hello, and then we have the operator, the function operator, which are the parentheses, and inside we have the string name, which means we have to pass something. That is another contract that we have signed, quote unquote, that says if you say give a signature, that's what they call when you pass say that this function has to have certain parameters, that is signature. If we say this is a signature, we are passing, you must pass a string, then you better pass that string. Makes sense, okay? That's what's happening there. So when we call, we have to pass something. I can say Paulo, or let's say Bonnie. There we go. Look at that. Now, if we run this, you guessed nothing's going to happen. Well, lots of things happen, but it's not going to show anything because we're not printing. Remember, we're just returning a string. To print it, you could either say print and say like that, put inside there, and then run hello Bonnie. Now, the flexibility that I'm talking about here is that I can go ahead here and say James, for instance, and run. It says James. I can say Bond, again, me with Mr. James Bond. I guess I love the movies. Hello, Bond. Or I can say George. You get the idea, right? I have that flexibility. And again, because it's returning something, I can also put that in a variable. I can even call it name as well and say hello and pass in here George. Okay, and then here, instead of having to pass the whole thing, just pass the variable. You see the flexibility? Hello, George. Now, what else can you do to make this code better in a sense that, since we've learned in the previous video, another way to avoid this clutter? Remember that return key that we talked about, since we're just returning one thing here? I'll play the elevator music until you fix this to look like what we discussed before. Remember the expression equals, greater than. Okay, I'm gonna play the elevator music now. Imaginary one, of course. Okay, there we go. We're back, folks. All right, so if you were able to go ahead and say, get rid of all of this stuff, and because we are better than this, since it's just one expression, statement in this case, voila! Look at that. Very beautiful. Just one line of code. We're saying, say hello, we're passing something, and then we return, but this is what it means, we return this expression, which is hello, and we are appending whatever we're passing in our signature as a parameter here, in our parameter. All right, run. Should see hello, George. Very cool. Very, 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 very cool indeed. Now, the beauty here, we can pass as many parameters as we wish to do so. Now, usually, it's a really good idea not to abuse this flexibility, because we don't want to end up with functions that have 25 parameters. That is just not good, right? So, if you can make it to 4, max 5, not even that, if you can just go to 4 parameters, that's probably the max that you should do. It's very distasteful, if you will. Okay, so we can add other parameters. I can go ahead, either add another string here, and I can say, for instance, last name. I can even go further and add an int called age as 4. It's just like that. Now, notice the moment we do that, we have a problem. Why is that? Hover over, it says 3 required arguments expected. Now, I call them parameters. They call them arguments. It's pretty much the same thing. It's just a language thing. All right. So, like I said, we have issues here because it's saying we said we were passing 3 parameters and I'm just passing 1. What is the deal, Paolo? Problem. So we need to pass the remaining 2 parameters. In this case, it's going to be, I'm going to go ahead and go here, just pass Kelly. And the age, since it's going to be an integer, I'm just going to pass 74. Okay, now if you run this, you notice it's just going to say George. Why? Because when we return, we're just returning the name. So this is very important to realize here. Whatever you're passing, right, it doesn't automatically, obviously, going to be returned. So we have to do the calculations and return, or do whatever we need to do and return the full sentence or the full statement here. Okay, so, or expression, I should say. So I could go ahead and keep adding. I'm going to say last name, right, because that's what we're passing. I'm going to put the next line here since it's all to have some space. And I'm going to say age, just like that. This is still one line, it's just that I had to cut it so that it's all in one. It's all well organized and you can actually see it. Run, look at that. Hello, George Keeley, 74. If I wanted years old, run, there we go. Perfect. Look at the beauty. Appreciate the beauty, folks. Now, play around with this concept again, and I will see you in the next video, ladies and gentlemen.